Good evening, everybody. We're happy that you've joined us today. And I want to welcome you to the Poultry Keepers live stream. We're your trusted space for practical tips and real world advice. We're going to be talking about incubators in just a minute or two. But Carrie's here, Jeff's here, we're all here, and coming up, we're getting ready to go. Oh gosh, when we were talking about doing this show on incubators, I got to thinking we could almost do two or three shows on that subject because it's a little bit different in different parts of the country, the humidity and the temperatures and all that. And some folks are still uh, kind of on the cold side with the weather. Down here in Florida, we've been hot and miserable already, high humidity. So if the hot weather hadn't got to you yet, just hang on, it's coming. Trust me.
Rip, I offered to have you come up and visit. I'd get you a good piece of pizza. We'd get you some good Lebanon bologna, right?
We're talking now. Wouldn't take much.
You can teach me how to make proper Southern iced tea, and we can sit down to some good cheese, local made, Lebanon bologna, right?
I'll have to check out, see what time the next flight leaves.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm
really.
here. I'm here.
And hey, folks, if you're joining us tonight, don't forget to drop your questions in the chat. We'll be happy to answer those as the show goes on. That's a real important thing to remind you of. And we got another thing. We just started today, and it was kind of Jeff's idea, and then we kind of batted it around. And Terry, I'm going to let you explain it since you're the one that pulled it all together on Facebook. Let us know what's going on.
I'm going to explain it.
You're going to explain it.
All right. So we created a group called Open-Minded Cluckers. If you can go into Poultry Breeder Nutrition, you can see where Jeff shared it there. And this is a place for smart talk, clean coops, and open minds. That's the tagline with it. And basically, we made a safe place for people to be able to go and talk about apple cider vinegar and everything else that's controversial without fear of being judged. And, we created some pretty solid questions for you to have to answer to get in. And you got to agree to the rules or, it's just a thing. We need to know if you're narrow-minded. We need to know if you've ever been evaluated or committed to a mental institution. We want to know if you're an uptight pain in the rear end. Those are just some questions that we have, and we've came up with some rules. Everybody's got to have rules, so we came up with some of those too. We don't. The first rule: don't be a jerk. The second rule is don't block admins. That's a quick way to get booted or banned for good. And no sales. This ain't a sales group. There's a marketplace out there for that. Now, if somebody asks you for a recommendation, please give it to them. If that recommendation happens to be self-promotion and you got to get out of control with it, we're getting you out of there too. So don't go hog wild, but definitely put your stuff in there that you want to learn about, and we'll be there, and other people will be there to help make sure we at least halfway drive you down the right road.
And have fun with it too. That's important.
That's the most important part.
Absolutely.
So I can talk about moon phases and tinctures and milk for coccidiosis and apple cider vinegar for heat stress and all that, and nobody can say anything.
Well, if they do say something, there's as an admin, you have that little boot and ban button, and and hey, one of the questions also asks if you need your tips evaluated by a doctor, you should not join this group. That's a disclaimer.
An important one.
Now, crap that people have been doing since the 1920s that works, and doctors say it'll kill all your animals. You know what? I'm sorry. People have been saying it works since the 20s. It probably works. So
there's a lot to be said for citizen science.
Yeah. Like this crap right here, CEG. There's a lot of people that say that it's absolute garbage, but I say it's probably one of the best $80 you can spend.
I hate to ask a dumb question, but what is CEG?
I'm glad you asked. It's cayenne, an E word that only Jeff can pronounce, and garlic mixed together with organic grain alcohol, apple cider vinegar, and nothing else.
The E word must be echinacea.
It is.
And all right, let me further clarify this before somebody thinks that he's making some sort of herbal martini or something. It is a unique blend of cayenne, echinacea, and garlic that is put together and then tinctured in organic vodka or grain alcohol in this case. And then it's allowed to sit and extract. And all of those have, antibiotic health qualities to them. Right. So, I can tell you as a person who's taken it for treating a common cold and other ailments, it tastes like crap. Okay.
Absolute garbage.
It is,
but it's
not
highly
good.
functional.
It's highly functional. But, warn you up front, it don't taste good. If you like the taste of that, there's something wrong with you.
Then I feel like you would answer yes to one of the questions to that Facebook group.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
Probably so.
Maybe two.
Okay. Let's go ahead and get to talking about incubators. Why do incubator issues matter? Well, it has a direct impact on your hatch rate, your chick health, and ultimately the overall success of your flock. Now, there's a lot of common myths and a lot of misunderstandings and a lot of misconceptions about what to do and when to do it, and we're going to try to get to those tonight. So why don't we dive into here? Jeff, what about incorrect temperature control? Fluctuations, too hot, too cold? What's your thoughts?
You and Carrie know way more about that than me. I've had one or two instances where people were keeping their incubator in a room that was not very climate controlled. And those fluctuations, they kept it in a garage that wasn't heated or cooled. Yeah. So the nights were going down into the 40s. This was in the western North Carolina mountains. Nights were going into the 40s, not in the garage, but outside, 30s and 40s. But then the days were getting into the 70s and 80s, right? So there was about a 20-degree swing, 10 to 20 degree swing inside that basement garage. Seemed to be throwing the hatch rate off by about 25%, because one of her biggest complaints was, her hatch rate wouldn't go above like 60 or 65%. And the more troubleshooting we did, as soon as she moved that into the main body of the house where there was heat, and air conditioning, that hatch rate went from 60 to 75 or 80%. And then we worked on nutrition and things like that and got it, up into the 90s. So, and that was a black Australorp breeder.
Incubators just don't do well when they've got those big fluctuations of temperatures. The more stable you can keep it, the better hatches you're going to get. That's the bottom line.
I even get kind of extra with it because my incubators, I have a old like bedspread, and I will put the bedspread over the top and down the sides, just to further insulate it and slow down the process of temperature change and fluctuation to keep it exactly the same. Because some crazy reason, a hen can hatch out some chicks in the middle of wintertime outside and get up and drink water and eat. But you can't fluctuate like that when you're doing it yourself.
Yeah, consistency counts. There's no doubt about that. And the same thing for humidity. If you can keep your environment where your incubator is, if you can keep it at a fairly constant humidity, it's much easier to adjust your incubator humidity levels up or down. But if the outside environment around your incubator is going up and down, it's going to do the same thing on the inside of your incubator. And you get your humidity too low, you get chicks stuck in the shells. You get it too high, and they drown when they pip, and they can't hatch, don't hatch well. So I think the one advice I would give on temperature and humidity is to get yourself a good, a good, no, not a $9.95 special down at Walmart, thermometer hygrometer combination.
Mm-hmm.
I like the Govies, or those little data collectors that you can lay right in there with the eggs themselves, and they'll take readings. The one I've got takes readings every 5 minutes, and I can pull it out of the incubator, and it's a USB port on it, and I can plug it into the computer, and I just get up a whole printout of everything that machine's going through. And
Rip, they've upgraded those now.
Well, this one's older than Methuselah, so
you can actually get that same one and hook it up to your Wi-Fi and run the app on your phone and catch out live data.
Well, back when I got mine, Wi-Fi was not handy dandy around like it is now.
I get it.
All right, so the temperature and humidity, before we leave this, I've heard some rumors, I am not validating these, but that like the last week is the most critical to have those stable. People don't seem to feel like the first 14 days, a little bit of fluctuation is critical. I don't know. What says the master? Rip?
Yeah, I've kind of gotten spoiled with this new hatching time incubator.
They're nice.
It's literally a set it and forget it. I've got mine set at about 45% humidity, and I cannot catch it varying from that at all. It's always right on the money. Same thing for temperatures. I can't catch them varying, but I keep it. Probably the best advice I could give somebody that doesn't have a hatching time machine or a real good machine is candle your eggs and go by the air cell. The longer the egg is in incubation, the larger the air cell needs to become, because if it's a small air cell, those chicks are going to pip when they get too dry.
But you keep yours in your house, right? So
yes.
Yes. Okay. So, like the person that had theirs in the garage or, semi-climate controlled, right, is, if they get those fluctuations in the first 2 weeks, do you think is it going to impact that total hatch? I mean, is there a period where you've got to be perfect is what I guess I'm getting at?
I guess my advice then would be if you can stabilize it, for heaven's sakes, during the last 7 days or so of incubation.
Okay.
To me, that's one of the more critical points.
Yeah, if you can get it like 50 to 55, some people, hit 60. but anywhere between 50 and 60, those last 5 to 7 days, consistently, you'll be solid.
And some folks don't know this or don't realize it, but when those eggs start to pip, you're going to get a natural spike in humidity inside your incubator.
Oh yeah, I like seeing in some of the groups when people are having a cow. I'm like, hey, calm down. That's supposed to happen.
Yeah, it's perfectly normal when that happens. But if you're running your humidity too high, then that can cause you a problem too. And Sue, I think, made a comment. Be sure and keep your air vents in your incubator open.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, because as those chicks or the embryos are developing, they need oxygen and they release carbon dioxide. So you need to keep that airflow going in that machine.
Mm-hmm.
Fresh air
Yep.
in, cool air out. That's really, really important.
Yeah, that came. Someone was talking about wrapping their incubator with, insulation or blankets and stuff. And Rob said, make sure you don't cover your air holes. You can't
Absolutely.
lose your air. So that's where that thread started. But
And see, I like the hatching time and the also the GQF for incubating, and they have their holes like out on the edge. They're offset. They're not dead center. So when you put the blanket or whatever on top of it, you can kind of move it back a little bit and keep those holes freed up. And it allows that to work really well.
Rob actually just brought up a point that we wanted to cover tonight, and I'm going to put it up on screen. He goes, also more eggs equals higher humidity. You can have everything dialed in for a full incubator and then wonder why incubating a few eggs, gives you bad results. And, that was one of the topics we wanted to cover is, not enough eggs, or even too many eggs in an incubator. It's not going to give you those optimum results, right? So you want to be filling at 70 to 80%. It's really hard for a hatcher or an incubator to maintain itself properly, when you're 100% full or you're, below 50%.
And that's one of those things they don't include in most of the incubator manuals.
No. You can't if it's full, you're not going to get enough air circulation in there for all the eggs to be consistently, at that right temperature and humidity. I don't care how good an incubator is. It's just, overfilling, I think, is worse. But even underfilling, like Rob said, is, still an issue, and it's really hard to maintain it. These things are made to function at a certain level of fullness.
Yeah. Because I've tried to cheat that on my GQFs by double stacking the trays, and you still get a good hatch, but it's 15-20% less.
You can tell the difference, no doubt about it.
You're putting in 1,000 eggs instead of 500 and something.
Absolutely. We talked about that. We covered inadequate ventilation or airflow. Oh yeah, dirty or contaminated incubators. How many of you clean out your incubator in between hatches? I don't see too many hands coming up. That's an important thing to do. Now you can skimp a little bit if you have an incubator and a separate hatcher, but you still need to be cleaning it fairly regularly. And you definitely need to be cleaning that separate hatcher after every hatch. Sue also wants to know what is a good sanitizer to clean incubators. Sue, I have used Tetrol. I get it in a little aerosol spray can. I'll wipe the inside down with a damp cloth, get it pretty clean, and then put a light misting of that Tetrol in there and let it run for a little while. And I've had good results doing it that way. but I think there's any of the decent disinfectants on the market could work with that. I just like the aerosol. You can get some and mix it up and put it in a spray bottle. Just put it in a fine mist when you spray it. You, I just think you get better coverage, and it gets into all those little nooks and crannies in your machines when you do that. Power outages and equipment failure. Jerry, what's your thoughts about that?
All right, so I have 1500 VA UPS battery backups on mine. Not cheap to have, but it'll keep the incubator running for about 30 minutes. And after that, I have a really weird looking small, it's like one of the Hondas or the Predators from Harbor Freight, but it's not that great. I mean, I
You're
just got a cheap
generator.
Yeah, it's a no-name generator, and I just run an extension cord out the window of my hatching room and plug both of my battery backups into it so they can filter the power so it doesn't screw with the electronics on my incubators or my hatchers, and crank it up till I get power.
What are your thoughts about you lose power and it's all for an extended period of time? At what point do you think folks need to get concerned about losing temperature and all that in their incubator? How long do you think an incubator can go and still hatch some chicks?
Well, so with that, it's going to depend drastically on the incubator that you have. If you have a cabinet incubator like a Dickey's, a GQF, or a Hatching Time, they're going to have thicker walls and they're going to hold heat in better. If you also in the wintertime and in the summertime, if you keep your incubating and hatching room closer to the 80-degree mark, when you lose power, you're not going to have a temperature change as fast. So that plays a factor into it. That's why I use the blankets. But if you have a tabletop, having it somewhere like in a closet where no ceiling fans, nothing gets to it to change, that closet will actually heat up because of the heat radiating out of that incubator. And if you leave it closed, you're going to trap that heat inside the closet, which is going to keep the heat inside the incubator. But I have seen temperatures inside go down to the low 80s and then power come back on and have just as good of a hatch as if I wouldn't. The technology inside of a hatching time, I forget how often it does it, but it actually let the heat off to where it does fluctuate down before it brings it back up to temperature to simulate a hen getting off of the eggs.
And I just want to throw in one thing here, one comment. That short-term cooling effect is more important for waterfowl than it is for chickens.
Yes.
So just keep that in mind if you're going to be trying to hatch waterfowl.
Rob had a pretty good idea, actually. You can get fairly inexpensive inverters that you can put in your car cigarette lighter, and actually a fair amount of, depending on the vehicle, like mine has a 110 outlet, so you wouldn't even need the inverter. But you can run an extension cord and run it off your car for a while if you need to. That's a good idea.
I would recommend you to crank a car up every hour and let it run for a little while.
All right.
Yeah.
You'll wind up with a dead battery.
But
that's a great idea. So
yeah.
I mean, it really is. I have a 2500 VA inverter, and there was a time where we lost power for an extended period of time, and I actually used that to run my refrigerators. because I didn't want to lose what was in my deep freeze. I didn't have anything in the incubator at the time.
I was saying you can.
Yeah.
I was saying you can hook directly to the battery instead of going through the cigarette lighter, because that would be going through a fuse and smaller wire too.
Yeah.
You can get more amperage if you go direct to the battery.
Makes sense. I was just going to say that I've had power outages in excess of 24 hours and still gotten a hatch. Now it wasn't the high numbers that I was used to seeing, but you can still salvage some chicks out of it. So don't despair. It all may not be totally lost.
I would guess that your eggs more centralized in the middle of the incubator would be the last ones to, go below that negative temperature. It's going to be should be your bottom eggs and your outside edge eggs that are going to be affected the quickest. And
yes, I agree.
I mean, just from basic thermodynamics, that would be, that's what they taught me in high school anyway. So.
Let's talk about some common egg and embryo issues. Getting eggs shipped in is a really common thing anymore. But I'm just going to say the post office is less than careful with some of these egg packages. And if you have eggs shipped in, do yourself a favor, and when you get them, unwrap them, check them for cracks or broken eggs. Now, a small crack, you can repair that with drip candle wax on it, or you can use fingernail polish and paint over the crack. I've done that and had those eggs hatch. But another thing you want to do is put them in an egg carton and leave them sitting out overnight, room temperature, for at least 24 hours before you put them in the incubator. Because one of the big things that can happen when eggs are shipped is that the air cell becomes detached, and it's not in the big end of the egg like it ought to be. It's just kind of floating around inside. And if you can set it upright, that will give that air cell a chance to migrate back up to where it really needs to be. And I also try to, at least for the first 5 to 7 days, I don't turn shipped eggs just for that reason, because I want that chick to get oriented right, because the chick isn't oriented right in that egg, they're going to have difficulty hatching. Just some.
So you're talking about eggs, and Sue had asked early on, does she need to sanitize eggs? And I bet we all have an opinion on this, but if the egg comes out of the chicken clean and doesn't have a whole lot of manure, debris, or other on it, I wouldn't sanitize it.
And when I sanitize them, I know some folks dip them down in the sanitizing solution, but I would just leave mine upright in the tray and just spray right on the top. And that's about all that I did. And I got pretty good results doing that.
Using the Tectrol on that as well?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's what I was hearing is Tectrol. But I mean, if it's a clean egg, right? If it's a clean egg, and if we're doing our jobs as managers, they should be clean eggs because the nest boxes have clean bedding. But anyway, if it's a clean egg, I don't know that I would do anything to them.
I was going to say, if you're a good chicken tender and your eggs are clean, then I'd leave the bloom on them. But
absolutely,
I think the situation she may be talking about is sometimes where you have a really good looking hen that you don't want to cull just because she won't lay in the box, and she'll lay one out in the middle of the run, and then it rains or whatever. I think that might be what she's talking about.
And sometimes you get that when you have a lot of rainy weather, the birds just get dirty naturally, and some of that will rub off on them when they go in and out of the nest. So just kind of one of those things I try to play by ear. But if they're not dirty, don't worry about it. Set them.
Set them and forget them.
Set it and forget it. That's right. Kerry, what's your thoughts on early embryo deaths? What's some of the causes that can happen there?
People not giving their brood fowl proper nutrition. I would say that would be responsible for a lot of it. Primarily, probably zinc and maybe something else is linked to that a lot. But low vitamin levels in the feed is probably a whole lot of it if you've got your incubator dialed in.
Yeah, and if your incubator's not dialed in, that's something we need to mention. I forgot to earlier.
Mm-hmm.
But make sure that you have fired up your incubator well in advance of when you want to set eggs, and check to make sure everything's fluctuating or not fluctuating as it should. Does it hold consistent temperature? Does it hold consistent humidity? You need to get that stuff dialed in before you put eggs in your machine.
On a rip, I can't turn it on the morning I want to put eggs in it and hope.
Well, you can, but I wouldn't recommend it.
I mean, I tell people, hey, look, what you need to do is especially if you have a tabletop, when your eggs come in, turn your tabletop incubator on, put it where it's going to be, and then you need to take your eggs out of, hopefully they were shipped in foam or packaged really well, and then let them sit for 24 hours, 36 hours, and give your incubator time to stabilize.
That stabilization time is really, really critical.
Yep.
What if you're getting sticky chicks or unabsorbed yolks? Kerry, what's your thoughts there?
If the yolks are unabsorbed, then they probably hatched out prematurely. And a lot of times that is due to the heat being too high. It could also be a nutritional thing with the parents, but I'm going to say that's probably more of an incubator problem.
I agree.
Did I get that one right? 300?
I agree. Malposition chicks and failure to pip. This goes back to what we were talking about earlier. I see that happen more and more in eggs that have not been allowed to rest and the air cell to orient itself properly.
Mm-hmm.
So don't forget to rest those eggs. And Kerry, you were talking about early hatchers, but the flip side of that is you get chicks that are late hatchers or stragglers. That can be from lower incubator temperatures.
Yep.
But it can also be related back to nutrition. If your breeders haven't been fed properly with a good optimized breeder feed, they are not going to have the vitamins and minerals and amino acids to put into those eggs that they lay to make vigorous chicks. And vigor is something that can also be somewhat genetic in nature. Those late hatchers or stragglers bottom line, I don't keep them. Those are my early culls. And Jeff and I were talking about this yesterday, that you can't or shouldn't save them all. There's a reason. There's a reason that they're having trouble hatching. There's a reason why they're late hatching. And can you save them? Probably can. But is it worth it? Probably not. Because I found those chicks, when I would try to save them, invariably they produced weak, unthrifty grow outs and weak, unthrifty adults, that it was just not worth the effort in the long run to do that.
I was going to say, those are the ones that you'll put in your grow out for 6 months, and you'll go out there and you flip your bucket over and you're watching them and you're looking, and then you're like, Why is that one a runt? Is that the one that I helped out of the shell? Probably.
Yep. Good chance that it was. Hey, I want to take just a few seconds here to show a little appreciation for our sponsor. We would like to take a short break to express our appreciation to the Portrell Company for their sponsorship of the Poultry Keepers 360 Live programming. Portrell has been a trusted name in sustainable farming and poultry nutrition for decades, and their commitment to providing high-quality, natural products align perfectly with the values we hold dear in our poultry community. Thank you, Portrell, for partnering with us to empower poultry keepers everywhere. We're truly grateful for your dedication and support. Amen to that, because that's the Portrell sponsorship has been one of the major contributing factors in keeping this show going as long as we have. We're going. We'll soon be about 4 years old. No, we are 4 years old. We're working on our 5th year now.
No, I thought, are we that? Come on. I
Yeah.
thought we were only on our 3rd year.
That was last year.
It was last year.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
All right.
Because you asked me that question in January.
I thought that was our 2 year. I thought that was our 2-year anniversary. I thought we were only on 3. Good.
Hey, we've been having more fun than the law allows doing this show.
I guess.
I mean, depending on what state you're in.
I've been telling people it's, we got 2 years worth of backed up video. Now you're telling me it's 3 and I'm losing track of time. But
that
hey,
happens
before we jump in,
yes,
Dakota had a question about, he's had a hen that's been alone for 20 days, still laying fertile eggs. Is she still laying fertile eggs? He's trying to get another rooster on her before she quits laying, but
it's entirely possible. I've seen them go 30 days or longer and still produce fertile eggs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Right. I've heard up to 30 days. So that's a good chance. I mean, I'm not Dakota. You need to crack one of those eggs and look at it, and see. You should be able to tell, right?
Look for the bullet.
Yeah.
Rob says that some hens will. Whoops, it went away.
Yeah. There you go.
There you go. Some hens will really keep old sperm stored up for a long time, but put her with a new rooster. It might take a while, but she'll warm up to him. And once they start breeding, it's more likely his child.
Yeah. I ain't sure. I visited some folks and that hen wanted nothing to do with that rooster. Man, he just was not the right specimen of perfection. So.
I've seen that happen before. Golly, it's very frustrating.
Very.
And when it happens, it's usually with a mating that you really wanted to get chicks out of because you had high hopes. They were just a perfect match for each other.
This is when you needed to happen.
They didn't think they were the perfect match. I can assure you of that.
Doesn't mean she likes him. So, wrong size comb or something. Who knows?
And not holding his mouth right or something. I'm getting here towards the end of our outline, and we're not having a lot of this we've already covered.
Okay.
Well, we're just trying to do our best, Rip, to give the people a great show.
Well, another subject that has come up in the past few years.
I didn't put this up.
Okay.
Sue made a comment about, if the egg is not the normal shape, don't set it. I mean, don't put it in the incubator. Okay.
And don't set eggs that are their weight is outside of the norm for your breed and what your birds lay. Don't set the real big eggs, and don't set the real tiny little pullet eggs. That never ends well.
Ingrid was curious about, like smelly cleaners or something like that being around the egg because the egg shell is porous. Like somebody who may use harsh cleaners in their house or something like that, or, anybody have any experience? Does any of those aromatic?
I've not had any bad hatches that I thought I could attribute to that. It's something that I've wondered about, but I've never noticed any significant increase or decrease one way or the other. Kerry, have you seen any of that?
To be honest, I've never chanced it. I've heard people that I knew and people that I respected as hatchers say both ways. Some say don't do it because it can get through. Others say if the bloom are protected for 2 months, it should be okay. So I've never chanced it to find out.
Better to be safe than sorry. I agree with that.
So this is a big one, but Samantha Grigg, she gives us enough information, but 15 to 20% of her hatches, they're actually are fully developed and then they don't hatch. Some pip internally, some don't, across different breeding pens, different breeds. So, she's using a hatch time incubator. She's using the Futrell, show and breeder. She's using the Kalmbach flock builder. But she's hatching at 7,200 feet of elevation in Southwest Colorado. Okay. So,
one question:
the incubator dialed in, and she's tested it, from a few calibrated thermometers and ice bath and all that. So, thoughts, guys?
One question that I would have is, what breed is she working with? Is it a fairly common breed, or is it a more rare, unusual, hard to find breed? And when I see folks having those instances with rare, hard to find breed, I immediately begin to suspect some bad genetics going on there. I'm not saying that's the case, Samantha. Don't misunderstand me. But it sounds like you're doing the other things right.
Yeah, everything's good here. The oddball. I think she's doing everything right. I just don't know. Okay, so with other poultry situations, once you get above 5,000 feet of elevation, because of the reduced oxygen content in the air, is that also a potential, for those chicks not making it that, out of the shell, basically. Like she said, they're fully formed, right? They're fully developed. And
that's definitely a possibility, Jeff, I think.
And I don't know.
When you get chicks that well formed, something's going on there. That's not right.
I have heard a lot of talk about being over 5,000 feet, and everything from the barometric pressure to the lower, like the oxygen concentration not being as good. People have to get used to it. And I've heard that baby chicks don't really get used to it that well. I've actually known people in Colorado to ship hatching eggs to somebody at a lot lower elevation. And even with what you lose in shipping those eggs, they still had a better hatch than what they were in Colorado at a high elevation. I'm not going to say that it ain't genetics or nutrition, because some breeds, which she's got, the ones that she says she has is black copper Marans, Bielefelders, and Americanas. And those do have a melanizer gene in them. And I've had instances where birds that have the melanizer genes in them need higher levels of zinc, riboflavin, and iron. But it's really hard to judge that, because iron, the level that they need is so minute. And if you get very much, it gets toxic really fast. So if you're gonna mess with what you're doing, you really need to do it. But if she's using that Kalmbach flock maker and mixing the Futrell breeder supplement with it,
Yeah,
the nutrition should be on point for the birds.
Yeah. What's rattling around in my brain, and this may sound foolish, but should she even look at some sort of like a oxygen generator? Now they make those portable oxygen generators for people. If you could find one of those on Marketplace or Craigslist or something like that,
Stick it in your air hole.
I would be really curious if on the air intake, if we could enrich that incubator with a little bit more oxygen, if that wouldn't. Okay, so everything that I know related to poultry above 5,000 feet is directly tied to the oxygen content in the air. Okay. Now this hits the faster growing birds like a Cornish cross the worst, but it affects all the birds at some level. And above 5,000 feet, the higher you go, the higher your chances of ascites are because of that low oxygen content. So like I literally have to develop specialized feed formulas for people growing birds above 5,000 feet and reduce the energy in the feed, so it doesn't steal too much oxygen out of the bloodstream. So that's the only reason I'm going that direction is, if I had a small oxygen generator, or even got an oxygen tank and a small hose and just let it trickle some oxygen in there, I'd be surprised if it wouldn't make some of the difference. And I'm just thinking, I'm theorizing here.
But it makes sense. It makes sense, Jeff. And I got to admit, I'm down here in flat as a pancake, Florida, with hardly any elevation at all. And that's something I just don't have any experience with.
I was going to say, you're probably maybe 100 feet above sea level.
I'm 97 feet right here where I'm at.
Okay. I was close.
What is your highest point in Florida?
I think it's 137 feet. I may be wrong on that, but that pops into my mind for some reason.
Okay. So Rob had a really good idea. When you're mating, if you got a nice rooster, you can give him a live mealworm. If he feeds, and if he feeds it to the hen, and it's so. I guess he's got a whiner and diner first. Yeah.
It's actually in Britton Hill, Florida, 345 feet.
Well, it shows you what I know.
But that's also right on the edge of the Alabama border.
Now, we don't consider that Florida.
I understand.
I didn't know this. Rob said, don't you need to change the incubator temperature for a higher altitude because it takes a different temperature to boil water? And I didn't know that. And that would be more of a pressure related thing. And I don't have any advice for Samantha, but
I'm going to have to dig into that. Samantha,
I don't know. I don't know any hatcheries anywhere that are above that 5,000 feet. No. So
I'll poke around and see if I can find something on it. I'll be happy to do that. We just, we talked about a couple of issues that I think
that bag
sounds like they could help, but I don't know for sure.
Turn it back off.
One thing that we kind of got sidetracked before I could bring it up, but that's okay. A fairly new trend in the last few years has been adding feed and water into the hatcher before the chicks hatch, so they have the opportunity to eat and drink as soon as they're hatched and can move around a little bit. I know John Gunnerman does that. He's designed him using he's got a hatching time machine, and he's designed some little waters that he puts in his hatching tray and little feeders there. And man, he's got some videos baby chicks, they're a little wobbly, but they're sure eating and drinking. And Jeff, I think I've heard you mention that the sooner we can get feed and water into these chicks, the better, stronger start they're going to have.
Yeah. And I was just visiting Mike Lotzer in Alaska, um, on the last show, and he also had some feed and water in the hatcher. But here's the thing, and we know this without a doubt. This has been studied. The sooner we can get food and water into a chick and develop its eating habit, which is, in the brain signals as far as creating their appetite, the sooner we can make that happen, the better that bird's going to grow. Faster, right? More, not that we're trying to make everything a Cornish cross. Don't get me wrong, but you know what? We have to establish eating habits. Should be within the first 48 hours. And that's so, people that are leaving chicks in the hatcher for a long period of time, waiting for all of them to hatch because they're worried about disturbing that temperature thing. This is my personal opinion, so don't crucify me, but I really would love to see chicks get something to eat in under 12 hours. Eat and drink in under the first 12 hours. And I think it's going to be night and day how those chicks develop, that we can get food into them and establish that eating habit.
Well, the one thing that I've learned is the more we learn is we can apply that, and it's those little tiny things just like that. And of course, that's not too tiny, but those small measures that we can take to really produce better birds faster. It's just a common sense thing to do.
All right, so I want to throw this out there. I have a friend of mine named Bob that is up there, and what he does is increases the humidity to 50 to 55% during incubation, 70 to 75% at hatch, which below 5,000 feet, that's like ridiculously high. And drop the temperature to 98.5 instead of 99.5. So drop it a degree and run your humidity up for incubation, 50 to 55 and 70 to 75 at hatch. That is on a forced air incubator, that temperature going down to 98.5. If you have a still air incubator, you should go more to 101, which makes absolutely no sense. But it's incubating at 7,000 feet. Those are the recommendations.
Well, so Samantha said her hatching rates to others, like eggs that she's shipping, are excellent, right? That are below her elevation.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I would look for somebody's used oxygen generator, or
something like
if you can
that.
figure out how to get a bottle of oxygen and just really lightly crack it and run a hose into the incubator. I don't know what else to suggest, and maybe somebody has other ideas, but so who did you get those recommendations from, Carrie? Is that
Bob.
from the hatching time? Bob?
Yeah.
Okay.
My friend
Just
of mine.
Bob. Just Bob. Okay.
Good old Bob.
Yep.
All right. Muhammad asked, what's a good option for a mixer that's larger than a cement mixer? Yeah, my only lead is a Sedenga.
Well,
Carrie, how you like your Sedenga?
Muhammad, I'm going to tell you this. You can go to Lowe's and buy the Cobalt brand, and you can mix up 75 to 100 pounds at a time. You can get a couple of those on the 4 cubic yard or foot, whatever, and do it. Aside from that, get you a Sedenga pre-batch mixer. It does 500 pounds at a time and works like a charm. Once you get all your ingredients in it, you're going to 500 pounds full capacity. Once you dump all your ingredients in, 10 minutes and you got a really good mix.
That's pretty impressive.
That thing is sweeter than a Cadillac.
Yeah. Once the last ingredient's in, actually 7 minutes is enough, but Carrie likes 10. And as soon as
I don't time it, I watch it.
Okay.
So it may be 7. When I just watch it, that's when I take a break.
Sedenga is the only one I know that's making a small one. Years ago, the Steiner Corporation, that now they make lawnmowers, but Steiner is a name you can look for as a used, and that's a rotary type mixer. But yeah, there's not a whole lot out there in that under 2,000 pound range for mixers.
And that Sedenga, it runs off of, if you get the single phase model, it'll run off of a clothes dryer plug, 30 amp, 240 volt. And unfortunately, $6,700 for a new one is about right.
Well, if you're turning out those big batches of feed on a regular basis, man, that'd be a lifesaver.
It really helped me out a lot.
It'll pay for itself. It'll pay for itself in time, if you take care of it, right? And, our Sedenga, which Carrie's using now, is well over 10 years old. And a couple of minor modifications for his setup, and, he's making feed. So it works.
Yeah, the only thing I did was swap out the motor to a single phase motor because I don't have 3-phase here. And I just swapped the relay out for a higher amperage relay, but
yeah. So Samantha said it makes sense. She's kind of afraid to blow her house up with an oxygen tank, an O2 tank going. But she also said that water still boils at the same temp, but it takes longer because of the O2 particles are more spread out, in the water. So with that being said, I think the O2 is the ticket for inside that incubator. I didn't know that the O2 particles are more spread out, but the same thing's happening inside the moisture or inside those eggs inside that hatchery.
And the only real damage with one of those oxygen tanks is if you knock the tip of it off, it'll turn into a missile. But even if it's sitting upright and it falls over, that's not going. You may be like, whoa, and look at it, but no. I had one fall out of the bed of my truck one time because I forgot and left the tailgate down, and it didn't break. Scared me pretty bad, though.
I can imagine it did. Gee. Got a, we got another one. This is a little bit off topic from what we're talking about, but, and Jeff, I know you've already answered this to him, but there's some other people that may be having the same thought in their mind. He's been looking for fish meal since Jeff spoke about how good it is for his chickens, and it is. Where's a good place to buy it?
For trail.com.
That's, and I asked him where he was at, and he didn't respond, so I think he disappeared. But look, all fish meals are not created equal, folks. So there's a large amount of fish meal in the U.S. that is actually a byproduct of the catfish farms in the South. The catfish farms all across, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, even over into Texas, up into Arkansas. So they're taking the the heads, the lips, the tails, and the buttholes, and they grind that up and turn it into fish meal. And it's cheap, right? And then some places will add some fresh menhaden fish meal to it and make it not as cheap, but make it a little bit better so it hits the 60% protein mark. These do not have the same amino acid profiles when you start getting, herring meals, sardine meals, whole fish meals, right? So they're good. I'm not going to tell you not to use them, but just know that they're not as good. Here's the thing. The catfish in the South are being fed corn and soy-based diets. Okay, so the amino acids of those catfish are not the same as the catfish you're going to go catch out of the river or lake or whatever, simply because of what they're being fed. So that's just
facts.
So
good.
Where can you get it? Most feed mills can get it for you. They just have to order it in from their supplier. But, just ask, what kind of fish meal is it? What kind of fish are they using?
Yeah, we've got 2 small mills down here close to me, and I've checked with both of them, and they said, no, we just use catfish meal. And I thought, no thanks.
Yeah, well, the price point is there.
Oh, yeah. Well, I know why they're doing it, absolutely. But, and I guess my philosophy is if you're going to go to the trouble to get it, go to the trouble to get the good stuff.
Yeah.
Well, it's not cheap, right?
No.
It's just not, but
the results are so much better.
But how many people listening to the show tonight have cheap chickens? Anybody got cheap chickens? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Nope.
I know what you guys got invested in your breeding stock, right? And a lot of the people over in the comment list, I know what a lot of people have invested, not just actual dollars, but with their time, their energy, right? The investment that they make into having the right pens, the right runs, the right living conditions. Everybody's got a huge investment in raising chickens. What corners do you cut? I mean, where's the right place? So.
I came up with a little saying quote today that I was kind of proud of, but high quality feed will make your birds thrive. Cheap feed may keep them alive. So that's one thing I refuse to cut corners on.
That's a good way. That's very politically correct and grammatically correct to say that. Well, very good, Rip.
I thought about putting it on a T-shirt, and you could have a big healthy chicken up here, and then one laying on its back with his legs up on the lower. But probably pushing my luck a little bit. Oh, I'm getting bad here. Folks, before we go, I just want to say thanks for joining us for this incubation session. We hope you leave with a few more tools in your toolbox, maybe a little bit more confidence for your next hatch. Don't forget, if you have a question, by all means, let us know on one of the groups. We'll be happy to help you out. And don't forget to subscribe to this show on our YouTube channel. Leave us a comment. And by all means, if you enjoyed the show, share it with your friends. There's nothing better than a personal recommendation to try something out. When I get a personal recommendation, I usually pay attention to that. So recommend us to your friends. Before we go, Jeff and Carrie, do you guys have anything else?
Don't forget our new group. If you're looking for alternative ideas that are outside the box, the new group could be for you.
Boy, are we outside the box. No. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you in 2 weeks. So long.